behalf of IEEE SPS, this is Sarul Darshan here. And so, like, our guest today is Niyati Kautilya. He's a embedded systems expert and also he is pursuing his final year from the Christ University, Bangalore. Also, he's a very good friend of mine and my mentor, you can call it. And today we are going to talk about VLSI, very large scale integration, the past, present, and the future. So, I hope I'm audible to all, right, guys?
Yes, Bhaiya.
Yeah, I don't want this session to go like the in the normal one where like the guest some comes and talks and you guys just listen and go back. Okay, it should be interactive. There'll be lots of questions posted to you also, and like, you people will have to reply for it. Right? Fine, great, Akshat. Okay, next slide, Pawan. Okay, so like I'll be beginning off with the retro part of the VLSA webinar today, and like the guest will take over from the present and the future part. So in the retro part, this is the first transistor. Okay, so before going into the main picture, I would like to like give some definitions for people who are starting from the basic, like maybe like a definition on transistor, etc. So a transistor is a device composed of semiconductor material that can conduct and insulate, which is generally made of germanium and silicon. So transistors switch and modulate electronic content. Before transistors, there were vacuum tubes used. Before this transistors came into picture. So the transistor was the first device designed to act as both transmitter, converting the sound waves into electronic waves, and also resistor, controlling the electronic content. So the name transistor comes from the trans of transistor and sister of resistor. So this was very influential invention at that time, so particularly because of vacuum tubes. They were very like disadvantages to the people back then, and like this was a very big influential invention back then. So after the transistors came in, there were many generations coming up. For example, like after transistors, they were into second, third, fourth generation, which used ICs, microprocessors, etc., which will be explained by our guest. I'll be talking about the transistors part and the ICs part, the basics of it. So this is how the transistors were born. Like I will have to like excuse me, like I will have to like add in people at times also. So I'll stop in between. So like the first transistor which came into picture was field effect transistor, which is shortly known as FET, and it was used to it uses electric field to control the flow of current in a semiconductor. And Julius Edger was notably the first person to come up with an idea of FET, and he patented it in the year of 1925, and in 1934 Oscar L also patented, but both of them couldn't like make a working model of semiconducting device on this concept. So after their patent got expired, John Burden, Walter House Brittain, and William Shockley at Bell Labs in 1947. After the patent got expired, they were into this project. So like what they were trying was the transistor. One second, yeah, but they were unable to like build a working practical semiconducting device on this concept. So transistor effect was later observed and explained by John Burden and Walter House Brittain under William Shockley at Bell Labs. So shockingly, like initially they attempted for a working FET by trying to modulate the conductivity of a semiconductor, but they were very unsuccessful due to the surface states and the dangling bond and the germanium and copper compound materials. So in the course of like due to some other reasons behind the failure to build a working FET, later went inside making a point contact transistor in 1947, which was followed by Shockley's bipolar junction transistor in 1948. So after the point contact transistor, which was the milestone, the major first milestone in this birth of transistor, they even received Nobel Prize for their works in the year 1956. So after which MOSFET came into the picture. MOSFET is fully known as metal oxide semiconductor field transistor, which is shortly known as MOSFET. So it is a type of insulated gate field effect transistor that is, fabricated by controlled oxidation of a semiconductor, which is basically silicon. And voltage of the covered gate determines the electrical conductivity of the device. This ability to change conductivity, the amount of applied voltage, can be used for amplifying the electronic signals. So MOSFET was invented by Mohammed M. Atalia and Davan Kong in the same Bell Labs in the year 1959 and were presented in 1960. It was the basic building block of modern electronics, which we are all part of today. So they in the year between 1960 to 2018, 13 sextillion, that is 1.3 into 10 power 22 MOSFETs are being made, and it is the most common device to be manufactured. It is used across all the digital and analog ICs, and also the most common power device. So like there's a question like, have you ever like wondered, is there any computer with the analog format, or like anything with analog, like analog computers, etc.? We don't use analog commonly. Can anyone like give me the reason why, guys? Why don't we use analog instead of digital?
Analog is a continuous form of data, and for better processing, we need discrete values such as Boolean values 0 and 1.
Yeah, that is what,
Confusing
like,
between
why
values.
difference.
1 volt and 2 volt values, it may jump
Because
easily.
either we can have a voltage level high or a voltage level low for transistors to act
Okay,
as
see, why we prefer digital signals are, the effect of distortion, noise, and interference are very less in digital compared to analogs. And digital circuits are more reliable, and like they are very easy to design, and they are very cheap also. And the hardware implementation of digital ones are more flexible than analog. And probability of error occurrence in this model is very less compared to the analog ones. Next slide. After statement. Okay, yeah. So now we are going into the main picture of today's topic, that is integration. So putting together of transistors is known as integration. There's a meme below. You can like check it out. Yeah, and after statement. So like ICs are also known as integrated circuits. So like they are usually made of silicon, and ICs are nothing but like many large number of MOSFETs connected into like integrated into a small chip. That is what is IC. This results in circuits that are made of magnitude smaller, faster, and are very less expensive than the discrete electronic components which are constructed. IC's mass production capability and reliability and building block approach to the IC design has ensured like the rapid adoption of standards in place of discrete ones. Like all the discrete ones are being replaced by the ICs in the past. Like all I'm talking is right now about the past, so like we will have to imagine that. Right now I know in the old situation everything etc has changed, but then like back in those days, so ICs are, like it started getting used in literally all the electronic components which is starting to come back then. And the main advantage of ICs are like over the discrete ones are the cost and the performance. Cost is very low with all their components. As ICs are printed as a unit by photolithography, and all this, the methods of making of ICs also will be explained by the speaker, rather than being constructed one transistor at a time. So further packaged ICs use very less material than discrete circuits. Okay. Performance is high because ICs components switch quickly and consume comparatively little power of the size and approximity. How does this label? So like I think everyone would have studied Moore's law in FEEE, or like I think in the DLM. So what Moore's law states is that the number of transistors in the microchips doubles every year. Once again, that once again, I think. And I know like you people might know where this picture is from. It's from Wikipedia, so you guys can check it out. And like the Moore's law says that the empirical regularity, that the number of transistors on ICs double approximately every 2 years. This is more of a statement rather than a physics observation or prediction. So it states number of transistors on microchips doubles every year, and also the cost also comes down relatively. I think next slide. So these are the various years in which the integrations began. In the year of 1950, it was around the small scale integrations, and 1960 was around medium scale integration. Then 1970, 80, 90, and in the year of 2000, super large scale integrations have begun. Super large scale integrations are nothing but they have density of 10 power 6 of transistors and all the other components in the IC. Aditya Slane. Next one. So like these are the some of the lesser known integrations, which are like wafer scale integration, system on chip, 3D ICs. So these are the definitions are below. You guys can check it out. Also, like if you guys have ever heard of silicon graffiti, silicon art, silicon rolling, these are all the technologies or like features which are happening right now. Like like Intel embedding their names on on their ICs, etc. These are all happening right now, and our speaker will be talking about that also. That is like open it to his session. If you guys have any doubts on the definitions, etc. till now, you guys can ask me. After that, the guest will take over. He'll be talking. You guys have any other doubts?
Yeah.
No, we are.
Great then. Okay. Kauti, you can start now.
Am I audible?
You are.
Okay. Good evening to one all here. That was a pretty good intro about me. We are friends. He told me, he introduced me as his mentor. That's all for the sake of presentation is doing. But we are jiggery those kind of friends.
It is true.
Okay. So I'm actually pursuing my bachelor's in electronics and communication engineering at Christ University, Bangalore. And people call me Kauti. That would be easy for you. And I'm so much into electronics that I don't understand theoretical stuff more, but get into practical stuff and get the results that I require. I'm sometimes called a nerd, sometimes called geeky in electronics. So yeah, that is why your friend Arul Darshan brought me to this lecture to lecture you people about what a VLSI is. So yeah, Arul Darshan had given you a good intro about what the past about electronics were and how transistors came into existence and how integration took over and how billions of transistors were embedded into a small chip size, which is smaller than a grain of rice or something. So yeah, let's begin. So VLSI today in the sense this decade, let's look at the technology's point of view on what VLSI is. As everyone know, VLSI is very large scale integration. Let's look at applications today. Now tell me something that is connected to electronics but doesn't have a chip. Can anybody go for a guess or something?
Guys, go on. Sorry, you wanna answer it?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Okay.
Like, can you tell me an example of an electronic device that is connected to electricity but doesn't have a chip in it? Yes,
I think the telephones that we had.
Yeah, old generations, yeah.
Yeah, in the old generation telephones, landlines, those didn't have much chips. They would have had electronic components, but I don't think they have chips at that.
Yeah, okay, completely clear. Yeah, olden days, cell phones and those gramophones, they used to be analog and they were not so much into electronics. So those kind of instruments actually belong to a particular field called electrics or electronics. We are discussing about electronics too. So what happens in electronics is we regulate the flow of electricity. Wherever there is a regulation of electricity, there comes into picture this concept of VLSI. VLSI, there might be a particular chip or there might be billions of chips. It depends upon where we use it, what we use. Some rarely, most commonly used electronic devices are of this technology. Now come from a subset of a technology called VLSI. Even though it was invented in 1976, for example, you take within 1976 to 1980, it was invented. So when this kind of a technology was ruling at that point of time, even today in your textbooks it is mentioned as VLSI only. You don't see GLSI or something of that kind, because VLSI was the birth for every integration to take place. At that point of time, it was booming the industry, booming the electronic. Every electronic device today has VLSI component in it. That's what I'm willing to say. And some examples you can take for communication. Now today communication has the most components that VLSI chips are manufactured for. Second one being smart devices and smartphones. You might have heard about the semiconductor shortage. We'll be discussing about that further. You look at automobiles, everything is made up of semiconductors. They have chips, they have SOCs. It depends on automobiles to take their own chips further or get it from a different company and put it inside. Wherever you find decision making models, wherever you find electronics which is supposed to take decisions, those particular places you find these chips for compulsory. Yeah, I've told you the regulation of electrons requires a chip in it. There are lots of applications. You name it, it will be an application of electricity or electrician. It will be a example of VLSI being used in that. So there are several types of transistors that I guess our lesson discussed about. One being the point of contact transistor, that was the first model to be invented. Second one being giving rise to bipolar junction transistor, which is one of the basic transistors that most of you people might have used in your labs and have conducted experiments, blown it off, torn it, whatever things you want. Then after BJT, there was some advancements that took place and resulted in something called as FET. FET is a field effect transistor. After FET, there was something that came into existence with something called metal oxides. So here metal oxides were used as what you call a fabrication element or a barrier through which the property of transistors was taken care of. So that is why they're called MOSFETs, MOSFETs, metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistor. After MOSFETs are invented, realized that MOSFETs cannot be integrated into more number of components. So there came into existence a particular technology called CMOS. CMOS, aka complementary metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistor. FET is thrown away because it needs to be 4 letters. So CMOS, when it came into existence, everyone was astonished because of its speed. What a particular MOSFET could deliver within 1 minute, CMOS could deliver the same thing with 2 to 3 seconds at that point of time. So CMOS is nothing but two MOSFETs, one being the positive channel, other being the negative thing. PMOS and NMOS connected as pull-up and pull-down networks in a particular circuit is called a complementary metal oxide semiconductor. This is the CMOS technology used. Every chip we use today uses this technology. If I ask you which is the fastest in the PMOS or NMOS, everybody would be knowing this, I guess. Electron is faster, so that is why people prefer NMOS, N-type semiconductors mostly. So yeah, and this is what CMOS is, and we use it everywhere. So getting into what I was about to talk here is VLSI design flow. Like whatever you design in your college, for example, you take, you're making a project. The first thing you do is you understand the design flow of something that is happening. In formal terms, in MBA kind of a style, you tell it as SOP, system of procedure or something. So in that way, you try to design how components work and what I'm supposed to purchase, then what I'm supposed to infer from this, iterate the results, get a result or something of that kind. When it comes to full professional VLSI, this is the design flow. So yeah, design flow for making an integrated circuit or an IC. So the first thing is you design the specification. Guys, if I am too fast, you can tell me so that I will try to alter my speed, or if it is okay, I'll proceed.
No, it's okay.
It's completely fine.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, let's start up with this. So first thing is the design specification. So design specification, in the sense you need to understand for what purpose you're going to use integrated circuit. Now, for example, you're going to manufacture a smartphone, you accordingly need to design it. Suppose you're going to manufacture a processor, you accordingly take the designs. Suppose for a small example, you need to make an AND gate or an OR gate. You need to take that kind of design specifications into mind and then design it. After you have a particular design put in your brain, you try to think how it works, how to make it work. You have inputs, you have outputs. When you give these inputs, I need to get this kind of outputs. How that is done is the behavior. That is what you describe in behavioral description. What happens in behavioral description is you take the inputs, you do whatsoever you call it. You call it maths, you call it imagination, you call it cosmology or whatever. You need to get a particular output. So that behavior, behavior is something related to psychology. Psychology is like how stuff work. If you get a particular behavior approach to something, then you can describe it. That is what behavioral description is. When you easily get a behavioral description, you will be able to proceed further. These two steps are something like more into designing and thought process. As you get a good design or something, you can proceed further. Proceeding further, you do something called an RTL description. I'll tell you what HTL is. RTL description. RTL is not registered transistor logic. RTL stands for register transfer logic. So RTL description. Now you have a concept of how gates and all work, and then you have a particular idea of what the behavior is. So now you get into something called registers. Now you get into something called registers. Registers are the basic elements of memory. You want to quantify memory, the most basic element that can store memory is register. People of computer science would know what an array is. So for people of electronics, the register is the simplest component that you can divide. Like it is the quark of a neutron in electronics, so that kind you can say. Yeah, that is RTL description. When you have described the logic using registers, you can describe anything because it is the functional unit, it is the basic unit. You add hundreds of them, you get a logic. You add thousands of them, you get a logic. Even a single one you can use to get a NOT gate. There are several buffers, or you can use a single one for everything. You call that a singleton set in set language. You call that is done using hardware description language. That is HDL. There are several HDLs that are used today. One common thing is Verilog. Verilog HDL. It is called. There is something called VHDL. There are several. There is something called CHDL. There are several types of hardware description languages which are used to describe how a particular register transfer of a logic takes place. You have a particular logic and you need to transfer it between registers. How you describe that in a programming or a coding kind of way, describe it using a logic is done using RTL description. So after all RTL description is done, you keep rethinking on it. Rethinking here means shortening of the code size or trying to use different logics in order to decrease the larger use of less components. Your aim is to reduce the components. Your aim is to reduce power. Your aim is to reduce the time taken to provide the output. All these features you keep into mind and describe it using a HDL. So when HDL is described of this kind, you will be able to get a proper idea of how logic and things work. So you proceed further. Further step is functional verification and testing. So in the previous step, we also done something called a behavioral description. Now when it comes to functional verification and testing, you verify each and every behavior there. You know what a register is supposed to do, and now you look into what each and every register results in. This is done using implementation of functions. The functions here might be mathematical, sometimes Boolean, not always. Mostly they are mathematical functions or equations. Using them, you test your design. Sometimes what happens is a particular application requires only working at particular times, not always. So your equation must define that particular time in which your component is supposed to work. If it is not working, or if it works in other times, it is a failure, or you need to restructure on what you have designed. So you get back into something called functional verification and testing again, or you go back to HDL and from there you generate a logic and come back. However that is done, that is up to you. Okay, after this functional verification and testing is done, you go to logic synthesis. So as engineers, we need to know logic behind everything from beginning to end. Whatsoever, we need to understand how logic is synthesized. For example, you take a smaller block of logic, you put it into a complicated logic. You must understand that sometimes it will be true, sometimes it might not be true. So all these ideologies, thinking, thought process, everything based on logic will take place in this field. I mean this subset. The next one, you go to gate level netlist. So now you decided how registers work and how behavior is and how the logic is. The next one is how logic can be implemented in electronic form. So the basic elements of electronics is register, that is memory. The next step up is a gate. You people know what a gate is? There are basic gates, not, and, or, XOR, XNOR. So there are many. So you represent all these logics in a particular gate level netlist. Gate level netlist is the step up of a RTL description, which you do using registers. The next step is the gate level netlist. Netlist is something that you like write down how many number of components you require, how many number of gates you require. That quantification process is done in something called making of the gate level netlist. When this netlist is done, you will be able to understand, oh, my IC requires this much space and requires this much pins. That kind of an ideological concept comes into picture only when you specify the gates and logics and kinds of stuff. When all this takes place, you'll get the list of components that you're required to purchase or order or whatever. It's a professional thing, so they would have components at stock every time. So next you go to logical verification and testing. So the functional verification is using mathematical equations. The logical verification is only using Boolean equations. You use Boolean equations, you use buffers, and you test out what the logic is coming out. So verification is a process and testing is a process. Verification is you check out what you have done and verify whether it is correct or not. Testing is something you take test cases. You take different kinds of logic, different kinds of input at all circumstances, given all constraints, and then you try to get something out of it. That is done in testing stage. So what happens is there are millions of computer simulations that take place, billions of test cases, test benches are used, and everything is tested. If any one test case is not responding as required, the whole process again goes back to RTL description, and you again come back from there. This is done here so that if you fabricate the device and then send it to the customer and then you realize that, oh, this was a mistake here, you can't call back 1,000 cars that were this chip was fitted into 1,000 cars, assume. So you can't call those 1,000 cars back and you can't verify those chips and you can't change those and stuff. If you let it that way, it leads to something defaulty, and that will in some way affect your brand name or affect your market share. It's like butterfly theory. You do something here, you get affected somewhere else. So that to avoid that kind of stuff, you again go back to HTML description. So this is one of the important job positions in VLSI. If someone pursues their career in VLSI, logical verification and testing is one job that you mostly get a higher pay and your work is a little less here. You just need to put test cases and verify test or something of that kind. So after this is done, you go to something called a floor planning. What a floor planning is, you take a particular, for example, you say film, you call that a film or a photoresist. These are technical terms. Okay, let's say you take a paper. You take a paper and you keep all your components on that paper. I'm telling about a paper that is 1 centimeter into 1 centimeter big. So big, okay? You take something of that size and you try to place all your components there in different orientations, one above the other, one below the other. If you play with that, and today's engineers are having very much time to play with those, but tomorrow's engineers would not have that much amount of time. So what they do is they take a software which many companies suggest and just automate it. So no computer can randomly perform a particular task, but in serial numbers, what kind of an orientation gets fit to you, you select that orientation and you proceed off. Later you realize there was something wrong, and again you come back, you place them manually, waste of time. So if you do it manually once, you can skip this stage easily. So your floor planning is the orientation of all components or all transistors in the required space that is given to you. You place them and route it. Route it in the sense connect them. Connect them using uh, that we'll discuss in the later session, later slides. You'll be able to understand. So you place them and you orient them according to requirements, and you connect them. So that is done in floor planning. Then you go to the physical layout. What happens in the physical layout is this floor planning is just orientation of products and everything. Physical layout is something that has layers in it. You can't just finish your process. If you're going to create a processor, you can't just finish off it in a single layer. You take hundreds of layers, might be more than one layer. So all those layers are physically processed in a software and then verified. When this physical layout is done, you will be easily able to understand what is the dimensions of it. Suppose you say you have created it for 1 centimeter to 1 centimeter, and there is no space for a particular small SMD component, and your size increases from 1.0 centimeter to 1.1 centimeter. That in today's world causes you a loss of at least 100 crores. You keep in mind. You know how smartphones are becoming thinner, and if your chip size increases, your smartphone size increases. No one in this world will buy smartphones that are growing in size other than shrinking. So yeah, so physical layout will give you the clear idea of dimensions of how much space it occupies. Space in the sense I mentioned 3D, three-dimensional space, not a physical layout. You get a three-dimensional space of how much components need to be placed and how much space it occupies, and how much you need to leave for the heat compensation, how much you need to leave for external port connection. All those are taken care of in physical layout. After this is done, this is verified. If there are some corrections, they're sent back. You know where it goes. If you have done it well, you go 2 steps back. If you've done it wrong, you go 6-7 steps back. After this is done, go for something called implementation. Implementation today is like you print a paper, you get a print on the paper. But if you look into something called fabrication, it takes years for completing all these processes and get to implementation. There are several checks, hundreds of checks. Only after hundreds of checks, hundreds of verifications from different companies and same companies, engineers, known people, scholars. After all this is done, you go to implementation. Implementation, what happens is if you start production, the first product will come out in say 1 month, depending upon the apparatus you use, depending upon the automation that you have. It takes time. It depends on companies. You take, for example, company like Samsung. If you design a particular chip today, you can print it tomorrow. They have those kind of technologies, that much automation possible, so you can get the chips easily within the next day itself. But they won't allow you to take a print the next day, because they need to go around all this, they check all this, and only then they give you your circuit for fabrication. As if something goes wrong, it is not your product that is going to fail, their apparatus is going to fail of a whole. So for them to, in order to rectify that, they need to spend more, and again they have to stop their manufacturing, which delays their releases in smartphones. It's all a butterfly effect again, like dominoes effect or something, however you call it. So at last you come to this implementation. So yeah, I'm done with this slide. If you have any doubts, you can ask me, or if I am supposed to proceed, I'll proceed.
You can proceed with it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, these are the important steps in how you make a particular IC. IC in the sense an integrated circuit or a chip, whatever you call it in your local language. There are 10 steps, okay? I will not go deep into the physics, but just give you an insight of what it is done. Like people nowadays look at these chips and they find it fascinating, and they don't mind about thinking how this works and all. They are curious about it, but they don't go browse or get to know how these things is. Just a small brief idea I will give you in this 10 steps. It depends upon a particular company to decide the number of steps. I've taken 10 steps as I have taken all the steps and put them so that I have got 10. Few companies do it in 5, they represent it in their form. Yeah, first thing is Okay, first thing is we use silicon. Why do you use silicon? Silicon is the abundantest, whatsoever grammar ever you use. It is the most abundant material that is found on Earth. So you use silicon. That is the only reason it is used. And there are several other properties that make it, that give more chances of it to be used versus germanium or arsenic or whatever alloys are there. And it is cheap. All these three are the main factors. So to make a chip of your quality, like a smartphone or something that you have, to make a silicon chip of that quality, you require electronic grade silicon. You call it electrical grade silicon. So that is called EGS. That is our required product. To get that, we don't directly get it from sand. Yeah, silicon is sand. Sand is silicon. So you take sand and then you separate it. Sand is the raw material here. Sand in the sense it depends. Okay, sometimes mining sand, sometimes the sand you find on your houses, that can be used. So what happens is separation of elements take place. Sand is a compound. Sand is a compound. So you separate elements from different. Some might be silicon, some might be carbon, charcoal. So you separate that and you take only silica. Silica is elemental form of silicon. It depends. Okay, you can define it. You can define silica or polycrystalline silicon, however you take. But you take silica. You take silica and remove all the other elements. You throw it off. You take silica and then put into something called separation. So you separate here and then you get a pure form. Pure form is metrological grade silicon that is used in metal industry. For example, you take smelting, copper smelting, you take molding, all those kind, forging, all those kinds, they use that grade, metrological grade. When this metrological grade silicon is used, that is taken and put into something called fractional distillation. You would know how petrol is manufactured into diesel, kerosene. The same process it is taken. So this is a solid form. So you fractionally distillize and you get some required material, unrequired material. You discard the unrequired material and you take the required material and put it into something called CVD. CVD is chemical vapor deposition. This is a purification method in which you get a more pure form of a solid. As you get a more pure form of solid, you get what you require. That is electrical grade silicon or electronic graded silicon. So after you get the silicon, it is pure, elementally pure, you can say. But it has voids, it has some defects. But I have learned about Frankel defect and those kinds of stuffs in physics. Let's not go deep into it. But yeah, consider there is a particular void in a particular dimension, particular cube or something. There is a void. So in order to remove those voids, there are several processes. You do all those and you get the required product by removing all those voids. This is done in a process called refining and growth of silicon crystals. So you get electronic graded silicon here. Then next one, how this silicon elemental form, you get lumps of silicon and you want to make it into layers. Now you have batter that is supposed to be put into a cake or something. You make it, you spongify it, you press it, then you squeeze it, you bring it into a layer. That cannot be done into something which is of a solid. It is silicon, so it is not that easy. So what you do is you put it into something called Sheklovsky process. It is called CZ process. You pronounce it however the way you want. It is a proper noun. So you consider it to be CZ process. You would have seen Instagram videos of how glass is made or how balloons are made. That kind of a process this is. What happens is in a smelter, you put the ingot, they call it, molten silicon. That is pulled through an ingot or a crystal. You take a particular crystal and try to rotate it. From down, you try to increase the length of the rod. And you try to pull it out. When this happens, you get a particular layer. It is not a layer, it is a kind of a candle kind of a structure, you get it. You get that out and you use that for further purpose. See, there is industrial grades roughly around 75 mm to 300 mm. It is cannot say that it will be in that particular diameter, but most of them prefer that diameter as it will be easy for them to cut in the future and easily fabricate process. So this is the wafer. When you chop this into smaller pieces in the sense 1 nanometer thick, 2 nanometer thick, that kind of a technology, if you chop them, they are called layers. You get circular layers and which is customized according to your size. Next one, you go to oxidation. Oxidation has several uses in fabrication. SiO2 is the most stable form of silicon. So what they do is they try to if a particular silicate layer is exposed to air, they try to close it using SiO2 because it is stable, it doesn't react, so that there are no changes in external factors that happen inside. So all these are taken care of by oxidation. There are several ways in which you could oxidize a particular thing. Sometimes you could add oxygen, remove hydrogen. All those chemistry is not required at this point of time, but you must understand why oxidation takes place, and we have layers of SiO2 sitting on that, so that there are several good profitable things that we get in manufacturing a chip. So next one, this is the most interesting and most important step in what you call an IC fabrication. So you have seen in the previous image, right, this magenta-ish color of a candle-like structure. That thing is broken into layers, small thin layers, and put into a frame. You could see here the non-reflectable part is that same thing but a very thin material. When you get this kind of a material, you place it in a particular design. You would have already designed what your circuit needs to look like, and you put into something called exposure to photons. That is what it is called, photolithography. Photo is light, litho is paper. Graphy is the science of doing it. So in this way, you try to carve pictures. That is what Alderson referred to as graffiti. So consider this to be square graffiti or something. You try to put different types of transistors and try to route them on this thing. This is done using several methods are there. Photo, in the sense, you could use lasers, you could use UV. Today they are also using plasma there. I don't know how that is done, but these are advancements that are taking place in this field. So when you print a particular transistor there, you get the layout you are supposed to do in a one layer. This is a monolith. Monolith is like one floor of a whole building. So the next floor you do, the next floor you keep connecting, you make things that are supposed to be in your way, and then you use this step. This is the most important step. Okay, remember photolithography. You remember this image, you will understand what this is. Next is like you have put a layout for a transistor. You need to fill it with something. Fill it with what? There are only two types of materials you can fill it with. One being the P type, another being the N type. N type is negative and P type is positive. In the sense, N type has more electrons, P type has lesser electrons compared to each other, putting the constants. So diffusion is addition of impurities. Why do you add impurities? To change the characteristics. Change what kind of characteristics? Like this kind of characteristics. One is the impurities. That is okay. Yeah. The more you diffuse, more impurities get in. Okay. A crystal is sometimes the clearest form of element available. So I try to dope these using a process called diffusion. So the amount of diffusion you do is based on the mechanism of diffusion, the way you try to diffuse a material into it, or the temperature at which it is done, or the physical impurities that you put. Sometimes you put N type with 5 electrons in it, sometimes you put 3 electrons in it. It depends. Okay, I'm telling you just for number's sake. Okay, I don't consider that to be, you can't have 3 minus and all. Then properties of lattice environment. Sometimes you put more electrons, it becomes less stable. Sometimes you put less electrons, it becomes more stable. Taking all those into consideration, you diffuse it. And last one is geometry of pairing semiconductor. So yeah, silicon, it gets that plus kind of a thing in lattice structure. When that is achieved, you go. That is the geometry that is being referred to here. Okay, after this is done, you get a clear, a clear layer of transistors.
Excuse me here.
Yeah.
The diffusion part, it happens in which state?
It depends. Okay, while you're doing CVD, it is done as a solid layout. So it will be done in molten form only. Clear?
Clear.
Yeah. Okay. It depends. Okay, now you use some dopant which is liquid. For example, they don't use liquid, but I'm telling you, if you use a particular liquid, you need to diffuse it only when it is a liquid. You can't solidify it and diffuse. It won't mix well. Or you can't increase the randomness by making it a gas and you cannot diffuse that. So properties will change accordingly. So at that particular optimal temperature, you try to diffuse. It depends on the dopant. Okay, yeah, move on to the next one. Any doubts? I heard something.
No.
Okay, then. Then you go on to something called isolation. After every fabrication thing is done, like printing of your transistors is done, you get into something called an isolation. You do this because it should not react with the external environment, or it must not react with the what you call neighbor material and kind of stuff. So what is next to each other must not be connected, so you get a different output then. So that is why you isolate using, it depends. Okay, sometimes you use oxide layers, sometimes you use polysilicon, sometimes you use SiO2, a stable material. You fix a stable material so that it will be easy for you to isolate stuff from there. After isolation, what you do is, this thing is something interesting, but it's the most complicated thing ever that can happen to a chip. You get a wire from first floor, you connect it to 10th floor. All this is done. It is easy when you design this and do, but it is a little difficult process. We call this contacts and metallization. Contacts is like you need to connect a particular chip to an external device. You need to take a contact from inside and give it out. So that kind of stuff, when you look after in designing, it will be easy now. Or else you need to spend more infrastructure, spend more what do you call apparatus or that kind to make these kind of contacts easy. It will take a lot of time to do this. There are many complicated, as you can see in the third picture. So that many contacts and that many layers, this thing has to be done. It's not that easy to perform this. So you do this. Mostly aluminum is used, I guess. Yeah, aluminum is mostly used. Sometimes tungsten. It depends. It depends on the company that is manufacturing, the purpose it is being manufactured. There are several what do you call factors that influence this. Last one is the passivation. This is something related to isolation, that it must not be like sometimes if you touch a chip, it blows off because your finger is what do you call your finger has some inductance and capacitance that would be more for a chip to take inside, so it won't function properly. So to remove all these kinds of stuff, they do something called passivation, that is put glass layer or oxide layer and they wrap it up. They don't expose it to light also. That is why they use photoresist materials or those kind of materials, so that if you, sometimes they are UV resistant, sometimes they are not. So yeah, that way. Then metrology and testing. This is the last before stage. Last stage everyone knows, it is packing. So this is testing. How testing is done in complicated factories and all. Let's just have a look. Okay. One thing is they use SEM. SEM is scanning electron microscopy. In this, they check the orientation of transistors is exactly according to the design or not. They just look at the transistor and they find out it is so much nanometer away from the design. If some tuning is required, they take care of that there. Or they use something called EDX. EDX is a spectroscoping method. Okay, this is not a microscoping method. This is a spectroscoping method. What they do is they sometimes try to focus it using X-rays and try to get out the reflection. So they see if some component has moved from its place, they will easily able to map it with the reflection. There will be some gaps or intensities of those X-rays will be higher in particular points and lesser in particular points. So in using that mechanism, they will be able to figure out. Not manually, but there are machines and automation, ML, AI, DL, all those stuff. It will give you a proper result. Next one is the TM. TM comes into picture when the object that is being fabricated is very, very, very small. You know what a transmission electronscope is? We call it traveling microscope, I guess. I'm not sure, but that kind of thing, what it does is, it is called penetrative testing. This method is called penetrative testing. The before one was a reflection or a refraction kind of a thing. This one is penetration. You send a high beam of rays, might be gamma, X-ray, according to constraints it changes. You pass those and you receive it from the other side. So if there is some void inside, this kind of mechanism or technique will be easy for you to know there is a void. You detect the change there, you modify your circuit. These are some things that needs to be taken care of. Metrology is the measurements and kind of stuff. You study of measurements is called metrology. Testing, you know what testing is. This is done in order to give feedback. Suppose, for example, there is some tuning mistake in the automatic parts that are supposed to print or move some particular points. There will be a small change, 1 nanometer towards right. You call this, what do you call? I don't know what you call this. Some orientation issue or a margin issue or something of that kind. Small error, very, very small error, 1 nanometer, 2 nanometers. It will have a very huge impact on the device that is supposed to go. So what they do is, if the first chip is printed, if it is printed 2 nanometer towards the right, they can get a feedback mechanism so that they can understand that this is a mistake and they go back and they reverse it. They put -2 there so that it balances. It's a kind of control system in order to get feedback and produce the right things you want. That is done here. No, the only reason why it is done is to give a feedback and a report. Then the last one, this is the most interesting part, okay? Every chip you take has its own design full packing. Every chip you take has a design packing. Or you wouldn't have seen these designs, I guess, because you purchase the furnished product. If you get into SP Road or something which is in Bangalore, you will be able to see this being sold on footpath and all. Just joking, but I'm telling you. Sometimes some companies are so much into packing that they spend double, triple times of the manufacturing cost in order to pack themselves. For example, you take TSMC, that is Taiwan Semiconductors. What they do is they need to ship their product to America. They need to pack it very well that it sustains rain, sustains dust, whatever you call, hurricanes, typhoons. It must sustain all those. When it is moved, it must not be shaken to, like, properties change, okay, when you shake or do something or that kind. Many properties change. Sometimes you need to you need to provide a temperature barrier so that temperature isolation is taken care of. So your chip doesn't heat more or cool down. So that changes in the size and all properties change. Everything is a dominance reaction there. So yeah, most of the companies are very specific when it comes to packing, because it is their product and reputation. Everything is dependent upon this packing and the stuff that is inside. So they pack it well. Okay, that is done. The VLSI, how chips are done, the processes have been told. The next one is ASIC. ASIC is called, what do you call this? This is a particular chip, okay? Particular chip which is designable. Designable in the sense it is application specific. Suppose you want to do a Pentium chip. Consider we are in the back. Suppose you need to do a Pentium chip. You use a particular technology and you use a particular thing and you produce your own chip. That is done using application specific integrated circuit. These are application specific, okay? These are divided into several things. One is full custom, semi-custom, programmable. Yeah, you can have a look of this. I will not be touching into all of them. I will be touching into the important things. FPGA is the most important thing for an engineer in VLSI to know. The second one might be full custom because it has more uses. Something that is programmable is often used instead of one time using in use and throw. Something that is programmable is mostly favored by engineers for their purposes. Okay. So let's get into something called full customizing. You people will be knowing what this A11 is. Okay, this is the advanced chip of Apple. I guess this is last year's. I'm not sure. I guess A11 or A12, something of theirs. I guess they can hold up to 200 billion transistors. I'm not sure. To approximately 200 billion transistors. So what in full custom IC is, it is dependent upon the requirement of what your purpose is serving. For example, you take first one is the processor. You need to manufacture a processor for phone for a particular device. You take a laptop or a phone or a PC, something. So that is a custom product. Your company has a custom design. Every level, a particular gate, a particular register, a particular orientation, everything is customized according to their standards or their requirement. So if from gate level to RTL level, everything is customized. That is why it is called full custom. So yeah, that is called full customizing. The second example here is you will be knowing what this is. Miners or a server room, whatever you call it. All GPUs used here are ASIC chips. Okay, they're application specific. Every company, every semiconductor company has mining specialized ASICs, which are used only for mining because they require some overclocking, hashing, and all. More of a computer science engineer should be able to tell what hashing and all is. I'll tell you what overclocking is. Like a processor has a particular frequency. If your operation needs more faster speeds or more faster threads or kind of stuff, what you do is you increase the frequency of the processor. So something related to that, and you overclock the processor and use. That is only possible in there is possibility that it is possible in many other chips, but when you use an ASIC, it will be easy for you. So the apparatus doesn't get a problem or something. That is why they use. It is because of this one thing that everyone today are facing increase in what do you call automobile costs, smartphone costs. This one thing has taken all the semiconductors stuck into its what do you call factories, and it has given rise to something called a global semiconductor shortage. What to do? And next one, this is a standard cell based array. These are some ICs. Like if you take, for example, this right side, it is 7408. 7408, I guess it is an AND IC. So if you want to prepare an AND logic IC, you use their datasheet. A particular company has their logic. That layout is patented or they have licensed it. I think the right side one is Motorola's and the left side one is belonging to ST Microelectronics, I guess. Both are different companies, but the layout is the same. You connect one pin number 1 and 2, you get output at 3. That kind. So the layout is the same. So they're standard everywhere. You go to some other country, you get the same. It depends. Okay, there will be something like 7.4 series, 7.5 series, 7.8 series. It depends. There are millions of ICs. You take data sheets, you will be able to understand how many number of ICs are there. It is standard cell based ASICs. Next one, this is the most important. An engineer should know. Look at how good the circuit is. It's something so. I find it cute to tell in that kind of a way. So okay, FPGA is something called field programmable gate array. So you can't customize ICs based on a processor. If you are making a processor, your application specifically make a processor. But in this kind of an IC, what you can do is you can use it for a processor. After that purpose is done, you can use it for mining. After that is done, you can put this. You can make this to give a gate output. Simple like that. You can keep changing. You can program your own code. You can do whatever you want. There will be a particular set of inputs and a particular format of inputs that you are supposed to give in, and you get the output as required. So most of the engineers have this in their homes, and they try to generate logics. Now you call something called overclocking and all is done. They test using these kind of chips. Then go to ASICs. Even some big companies, what they do is they take these kind of chips and they try to implement the logic. If it is successfully done, then they try to order ASICs or try to manufacture things of their own. Xilinx is one of the leading manufacturers in FPGAs. You will find this chip everywhere. Mainly this Xilinx Spartan. This is one of the famous FPGA boards available today. Yeah, and that is about present, and will not be taking more than 20 minutes of your time from here. So, any Christopher Nolan fans here? Answer for this at least, right?
You guys can talk to him in Hindi also, so it is fine. You can
No,
ask
no
him.
problem. Any language is fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I am a Nolan fan. Let's continue. Okay, so we were into the technologies point of view till now. Now let's get into opportunities point of view. Okay, opportunities like you are going to pursue VLSI. I've seen few of the first years and second years logging in. So Arlesson asked me to put this slide as a important slide so that people will understand what their job opportunities is and what they will study after pursuing electronics in VLSI or embedded systems or kind of stuff. This is a constant table to only VLSI. Yeah, before that, this is one thing you have to know. Many of you will not be aware of something called, you could patent your semiconductor layout. Okay, many of the people understand that you can patent your device, but it is more important that you patent your semiconductor layout. As it is there in the second line, you could sue if someone copies yours, or you could be sued if you copy someone else. There's a typo there. There's a patent for semiconductor layout in the world. Okay, remember this. is something that you can easily get. Next one, see. This is the market share of semiconductor companies. The giants are here. The giant for past 10 years, not 10 years, more than 10 years is Intel. We will see the fall of Intel in next 2 to 3 years. I guess we'll see what happens because there are many other architectures that are getting famous, like AMD Ryzen that is coming up. It is replacing many chips actually in Intel thing because it has some different architecture that is helping to increase performance, boost performance, and kind of stuff. Intel is also working on something different. I will continue that. Can see what the market share is. Then one more thing I would like to mention is most of the companies are Chinese companies and Taiwan companies. Few are American companies. They are not mentioned here because of some problems, I guess. I'm not sure. Okay, in this one I found it interesting. Okay, so these are the job opportunities you will try to find. See, few of them will be verification only. Where is it? Yeah, see, to our verification, designing, architect. It is based on this. You need not go put your hands inside a particular soldering kind of stuff is not required. You just program things. You look out, verify, you test how things work, how stuff work. If they're correct, you accept it or reject it or give it to feedback. So these kind of jobs are see. I've taken this from something called NSE website. NSE is National Stock Exchange. You know, right? Every second there are millions of transactions that are taking place. All those that kind of a company requires this many electronic opportunities. You look how many openings are there? 1,000 openings for FPGA designer. You apply today. We'll tell you in India. If you take, for example, there will be 10 lakh people into 10 lakh people who will be aware of what FPGA is. In 10 lakh people, 1 lakh people will have experience of what FPGA is. In that, only 10,000 would have touched what FPGA is. Might be lesser also. In those 10,000, only 1,000 people will have the knowledge of what an FPGA is and how it works. In those 1,000 people, see, if you know that, you are enough. You need not have a work experience in FPGA. Only 100 people will have it. So if you know what an FPGA is and you're clear about that, you could be easily placed into something of this kind. This is NSE, okay? National Stock Exchange. It is there in the website only. If you want, you can measure. So yeah, there are openings. You see, there are a lot of openings in a particular company. There are millions of companies like this. You know, NAS is there, BSc is there. This is just one field of where there is demand for this kind of people. You know, no automobile industry is coming into picture, and there are smart grids being placed away, charging stations, then AI acceleration. All those are coming. So might not be this year you would have more openings, but next year and forthcoming years you will have a lot of demand in this kind of fields. Heavy demand, I say, in India. I'm talking about India. Okay. So don't worry, you're getting into a good kind of a field only. Sometimes people try to do specialization. That is also okay. Some people with more geeky knowledge after completing their bachelor's only go to all this kind of stuff. You get experience in kind of stuff. You will understand what the industry is. Okay, that is about this job thing. This is the same thing. This is available in NSE website. You can go refer. Okay, now let's come to the practical point of view. Practical point of view is there are many entrepreneurs I have seen in your college. Okay, they come up with some idea. They tell that they're going to this venture capitalist. They're going to that funding person. They're going to get this, that, everything. First thing, if you want to be an entrepreneur in something called VLSI, this is how much it costs. Be clear of how much it costs. 2.4 billion is around something like 700 crores or 7,000 crores. It is 2.4 billion to 3 billion. So this is how a fabrication industry looks like. I guess this is TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductors picture. You can see for manufacturing 45 nanometer to 300 nanometer, it takes around 3 billion. If you want to decrease the size like 45 meter to 13 nanometer or even smaller, I guess for 10 nanometer, this amount will triple or multifold times it will increase. So you have to understand this is not something you could be a single person and come up and do. This is not there in India. If you look at India, from 300 to 150, I guess 150 is the maximum that India can manufacture. Everything else is imported. There is opportunities. There can be something big that can happen. I guess Tata is coming into semiconductor industry. Not sure. There are rumors. I don't take perceptions. I can't predict. Yeah, but this is something that all your entrepreneurs must understand. If you are a solopreneur, this is nothing that can happen. Mostly, you could take a particular machine and work on that, and you can tell, I'm going to play a particular part of your assembly I will be doing in my factory. We will be sending it to the next one. That kind of thing, that kind of rotation can happen. So it is very costly industry. First thing, understand the profits are equal to the investment you do. The more you invest, the more you get profits. But it requires something gutsy to take a call on this. Yeah. Then coming to the last topic, the end of silicon chip. If you look into some high knowledgeable newspapers or YouTube channels, they'll be like, we have reached the end of shrinking silicon chips. I'll tell you why. First thing is, you need to understand for 50 years this has been growing in a 54% CAGR rate. 54% CAGR means CAGR is compound annual growth rate. I guess all CA, oh, this is engineering college, right? Yeah, you will not be aware of this. Compound annual growth rate is something like it's interest. You think it every year. Now today you invest 100 rupees, the next day you will have one. Next year you will have 154 rupees. In that, it's like half the time your capital is being increased. In that way, half the size is being reduced every year. So this has happened for 50 years continuously. Everyone says an industry gets disturbed after 60 years if it is growing in the scale of 20% CAGR. This is reducing in a scale of 54%. Remember, this is something that is going to disrupt this technology. Yeah. And today, devices long ago devices which were in the size of rooms have today become a small dust particle in the corner of the. That is how much this field has seen. Yeah, then we are there's a typo there. We are leading towards a choke point in the shrinking of sizes. We further will not be able to shrink these semiconductor chips or kind of stuff. You would have seen many smartphones today. I guess Snapdragon 750 or 650. It uses 7nm nano chip, 7nm chip. That is the least size of a chip that you can do. All further models have the same size but have advanced their chip, like 750X or something. They have come up with something of that kind. I guess Apple's Bionic chip is 5nm. There are no chips that are commercially available that are less than 5 nanometer. But IBM has IBM and few other companies. I guess Google. I'm not sure. IBM has patented 1 nanometer chip. We'll see when it comes for commercial use, but it is for experimental purpose only that they have come out with. Why there is a possibility that we are not able to shrink is there's something called a quantum tunneling concept that takes place. Not into quantum physics, just a small thing you understand. You drop this ball from this line and you know it will not increase more. However you carve this, it will not increase the same height. This is what is Newtonian physics you have studied in 6th or 7th standard. I guess this is conservation of momentum or mass, something related to that. It can't go higher, that is the only thing. How this is coming into picture in a semiconductor devices, you know what a barrier is. For a decision to be on, it must be high. For a decision to be low, it must be off. There is something called a barrier in between. That barrier is represented by this line. Now, if a chip needs to be on, the electrons must flow inside this barrier and come to the other side. Only then it is considered to be 1. The same, if the electron doesn't flow, it is considered to be 0. But when you decrease the size, you will not be able to give power to this electron. The maximum power that the electron can take is reached today. Actually, this was predicted earlier, but in 2021, we will reach the maximum shrinkable size of a semiconductor. So what happens is the electron will be in a quantum state. This is some semiconductor physics I'm telling you, not quantum physics. Remember, the electron tries to stay in the barrier only. It will be in the right or left. You will not be able to tell. It will be in the center. If you look at a quantum state of thinking, you will find it there also, here also. That Schrodinger-Cat equation, all those are similarly related to that. For simplicity, remember it. The existence of electron is always probable. For an electron to exist, it is always a probability. So the probability of an electron existing towards one side is never probable in this. Let me make it simple. Okay, there is a barrier. The electron needs to cross it for one, need not to cross it if it is 0. So what is happening here is at a particular instant of time, it is having both values of 0 and 1. That is what is the basic of quantum computing. That is the future. So when a concept of this is taking place, it is difficult for us to even shrink the semiconductors. It'll what do you say, lose its potency. You cannot get the expected output out of a silicon chip or a transistor or whatever you call. That is what is given here. You can read it. You can further go through this because you will be able to understand what quantum computing is if you have understood what this concept is. It's called tunneling. Okay, yeah. If you put inside, you thought it will go inside, but it is outside only. That kind of a physics this is. See, I've told you, less than 5 nm in 2021, it will be difficult. So tech giants will try to invest in different technologies. So if you are getting into VLSI, you must understand this one. Okay, if you are clear with this, you will be able to proceed further. Okay, this one I'm supposed to tell you what happened. Okay, this we are discussing about VLSI, right? There will be some entrepreneurs or people with huge amount of capabilities and money who are trying to get into something, not a full fabrication industry, but it might be a part of it. For them, this one. Global semiconductor outrage. You know, if you look into every automobiles today, everyone have cut their production lines today. A particular company that is supposed to make 100 cars is making only 12 today. I'm talking about Volkswagen. It is because there's no semiconductors. Without semiconductors, you can't put something called ECU and control unit in a particular car. So when that is become outrage or scarce, you can't manufacture cars. So everything is put on hold. That is the first thing. And tell me if you have seen any new phone launching between these 6 months from now. Actually, September, many people try to launch phones, but the launching of phones is gradually decreased in this last 6 months because semiconductor shortage. Next one, geopolitical tensions. You know that rare earth metals are mostly available in China and those kind of countries. You know that there is some standoff taking place in what do you call India-China Leh border or something. So China tries to not send goods or India tries to not send goods. That is called geopolitical tensions. And you know that Taiwan is not an integral part of China, but China claims it to be an integral part of China. I mean, China is claiming that Taiwan is a part of China, but Taiwan is not saying so. Taiwan says that it is an independent country. You see, at least 15% of what semiconductors is manufactured in the world, 15% comes from Taiwan. It is a small island, but 15% of the all semiconductor manufacturing chips come from Taiwan. I guess there are millions of industries there. Everything comes from Taiwan. So these geopolitical tensions create disruption in our daily lives. We are not able to order a car, or if someone had ordered a car for September, it may take December or January to reach it. So those kinds of tensions has come because of COVID outrage. Second one, the government has come up with something called PLA incentive schemes. I'm not sure about the full form. It is PL incentive scheme, like under Make in India, Grow in India, those kind of stuff. If you have something good, government will support. Like I guess PLA scheme will give you 20% of what you're supposed to invest. For example, you're trying to come up with something that is costing 100 crores. Government will give you 10 to 20 crores if your project is good and you try to come up with something new. This one will happen. Next one is anti-dumping duty. Anti-dumping duty is something if you are trying to export a particular chemical to a different country, many countries manufacture it. You're trying to supply to different countries, only you are the manufacturer, then countries are ready to pay more. So what Indian government does is you are not supposed to export it. They put a ban. And that ban is put, only people around in our country will be able to utilize this. So there is something called this anti-dumping duty that is being put by government. Government is what do you call it? Severely monitoring on specialty chemicals. This include this photoresist, mask layers, all those that are used in our VLSI stuff. Government is monitoring them. So it is what do you call it? It is a step that government is telling so that young youth like you and me try to bring in some revolutions in this. Then dependency of rare earth metals. I've told you India doesn't have so many rare earth metals. They have uranium and thorium, but not of Gallium, arsenic, lithium, those kind of stuff are not found in Indian subcontinent. They're mostly found in China, Russia, those kind of places. So there is a demand for this. If predictions are right, there will be something called lithium war that is going to happen within 2 years. Okay, let's get back into the topic. And yeah, this is the final one. Advancements in existing technology. Now you know that you can't shrink a silicon more than what it is today. So what you do is something called improvise on particular technology. On the present technology, you try to improvise, and you try to make something better out of it. So the first thing is, today most of the computers are 64-bit architecture and 128-bit architecture. So what happens is when improvised algorithms using ML and AI used in existing architecture, the present 64-bit architecture chip, what you do is using AI and ML, several algorithms, you could try to boost performance. So that can be done. So using the same chip, you try to boost performance. So if this thing happens, all VLSI engineers will lose their jobs. Okay. Then AI ML will come into picture. Now you take anybody's resume, they would have mentioned AI and ML as one of their quality. Okay, so this is one method by which you could do that one. Next one, switch to light-based computers that have optical gates. Okay, this is 100 years from now, this will be into existence. So that is something called light-based computers. Now we have seen optical fibers that has replaced all the wires. Now we are going to see electronic devices that are light-based. So these have computational speeds up to 20x faster than what today we have. Optical gates. Okay, gates today are used to, you have this SSD and all, no? So what do you call this, solid state drives and all. That same thing, you could store information using light. You keep rebounding light in a particular place, that information never goes away. So that kind of a technology, if you bring in, it will be useful. So I'm telling you because if VLSI industry disrupts, these are the future technologies or advancement in the present technologies. This is one thing that takes a lot of time. This complicated hardware, it will take 100 years for this to come. We'll see how much faster. If some startup comes up with this name, we have already predicted that someone will come with this technology. Second one. Okay, third one. Okay, see, instead of using silicon, you could try to use several other elements which would try to give a better output or a smaller size. Now, there is something called molybdenum disulfide, MDS they call it, and the carbon nanotube gate. Okay, see, gates are made up of carbon nanotubes. You know what is carbon nanotube? They have received a Nobel Prize in graphene thing. So using those carbon nanotubes and this kind of an alloy, I guess this is an alloy, composite alloy. Yeah, when you put sulfur and this metal together in a particular state, you get this element. You get this compound. This compound with integration with carbon nanotubes will get you a chip that is 1 nanometer wide. This is tested. This is practically proved. What do you call? This is written as a paper and published. You could find this in ResearchGate or something. So yeah, people would ask why, if we are able to make 1 nm chip using this, why can't we make it with silicon? See, the property of a composite changes when you add different materials. So here the current electron flow, okay, electron flow is opposite to the direction of current flow. When electron flow is there, it doesn't suffer quantum tunneling as electrons flow slower. In silicon, it travels a little bit faster rate, but in this it travels slower. That is why it doesn't get into something called quantum tunneling. So within this one goes into the other boundary, it will be able to know it is crossed already. So you'll be able to generate decision. Okay. Then the next technology is something called hybrid technology. This is what do you call it? A wrong kind of a declaration, but might be a prediction for future. Quantum is a different field, digital is a different field. Digital is 1 and 0, quantum is 1 or 0. Both exist at a particular inference of time. So when 1 or 0 is there, 1 and 0 is there, you can't integrate that. But if some advancements happen and both are integrated, that will be the future of this technology. How many of you here have heard about something called, what is that, Neuralink or something? So this is based on that kind of architecture. So chips today perform calculations what humans give to them. So if you take neuromorphic chips, these are accurately designed in the way our brain thinks. What happens in particular devices is there is a particular storage element, there is a particular processing element. These two are separated. That is what you would have learnt in von Neumann architecture or Harvard architecture or something. So when you integrate memory and memory and processing into one cell, that is what is written. When you bring both these into a particular architecture, you don't require two particular units. The performance of 2 units is added up when you get a advanced version of what this. This is a phenomenal technology. You note this down. This will someday you will read this in newspaper telling that there is something of this kind coming up. Chips of this kind are coming up. Try to use these chips. This is something related to Neuralink that Elon Musk is into for people. This is also called synaptic web technology, SWC. Remember this SWC. It is what it is called. This neuromorphic chips is a physics kind of a name to it. Yeah, this is the last one. I've told you to use a different material. You need to change the whole architecture. Now we have learned about fabrication of IC. 10 steps we have learned. So if you need to change something that is other than silicon, like gallium oxide, this is actually better than silicon, but it has its own properties. It has its own defects. All this coming into picture, it boosts up the architecture that is required. So all these 10 steps need to be reframed. And now you're using a 5 chip that must be in a different size or a different orientation. All those need to be changed. Like there is something called Silicon Valley today. If tomorrow this technology is approved, it will be called Gallium Valley or something. It will take time, but the whole infrastructure need to change. That is what this technology is. Next one, I think this is the last one. Yeah. I've told you about photolithography. Like you use UV laser and all to print transistors and circuits. What happens in this technology? I think ASML is the company working on this. You type ASML, you will be able to know what this company is working on. Sorry. What happens is they use plasma guns to refract UV in a particular orientation so that they could get accuracy up to 9 nm. Getting 9 mm accuracy in photolithography is what do you call a very great technology. So in present same chips, you try to use lasers of this kind. I will explain this in a simpler way. Like if you take a microtip pencil, you have this 0.7 mm lead and 0.5 mm lead. You will understand how thin this 0.5 mm is than 0.7 mm. The same way, you reduce the size of the tip, that is the pointer, you will get smaller layouts. That is done using this technology. You watch this video, I'll tell you, it will be so much fascinating. I'll give you the links through all that and I'll send you. This is one technology. And the last, this is something, it is a kind of belief. If someone invents, or I can't invent a material, sorry. If someone discovers a metal that is more good, has better properties than silicon or germanium, gallium, arsenic. So if some metal of that kind is discovered, which is so much into our field of VLSI, that might be tomorrow's future. Yeah, it could be you too. It could be named after the person who is listening to my lecture also. It might be. Okay. So with this, I'll try to finish. Yeah. Thank you. If you have any queries, any doubts, you need project related assistance, final year project assistance, whatever you mail to this, you will get a reply within 2 hours, if not within a day max. So, thank you. Open to questions now.
Yeah, guys, you can ask any questions, not only like regarding to the topics you learned, etc. Yeah, Aditya, go on.
Hey, can you tell me more about FPGAs and links to learn it?
FPGAs.
Yes, Priya.
Okay, you are in first year or second year? I want to know this one.
Right now, second year, Priya.
Okay, right now second year. Okay, so see, colleges are structured in a way that you get VLSA, I guess, in third year, I guess. I'm not sure. 5th semester, I guess.
Next semester, I'll take Priya.
Okay. So for better links of FPGA, you require hands-on experience. Okay, hands-on experience on FPGA will be better. I would suggest some courses and simulations like in Udemy and Coursera and all, but they're like more into programming. You will not be able to understand how they work. You require something like hands-on. You need to get into particular universities like IIC Bangalore. Those kind of facilities have FPGA lab sessions and kind of stuff, so you'll be able to understand. They'll host some workshop, I guess. I'm not sure. IISc Bangalore, IIT Madras and all, they will have this FPGA related courses and stuff. Not sure. I'll get back to you on this.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's for MTech only.
Right?
Sorry, you weren't audible.
I looked into it, the IISc Bangalore course. It was for MTech only.
Yeah. It is for a specialization course only you get FPGA.
Yeah.
If it is there in your college, you will go ask professors, like I am interested into this. They'll allow you, even if you are from bachelor's or whatever.
I'll look into it, Priya, then.
Okay.
Any other questions, people? You can ask them.
But yeah, so what, according to you, should we focus on more? The designing part, or like I saw that verification had more job opportunities, but
Okay.
should we focus on the design part as well more?
See, what you call verification and designing, right?
Yeah.
Both are, according to me, equal only. Okay, like if you take into verification, you need to verify particular designs. That is again into designing. If you design particular chips, you again get into something called verification. These are something that are complemented. But designing will have a higher pay than verification, according to me.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
If there is no other questions, we can wind up. Yeah, go on. Who was talking?
If you people are shy to ask in front of everyone, you can mail to me. I'll reply to you personally. Not a problem. Don't put CC. No, only I'm telling you.